Over the last year or so, I have been trying to ring the bell and warn people in North America about what's happening in Latin America, Central America, and South America. The push away from the United States. The desire to walk a different path, or in this case, a different belt or a different road, if you get my meaning. People are very aware of what's going on in Venezuela and Cuba, Bolivia. But a story came out today that changes everything. And it will change everything. You see, I've tried to elucidate the foolish nature of the sanctions on Venezuela. Because sanctions don't work. Taking the economic engine of America and using it as a military weapon only ends badly for America and everyone else. Well, here's the story. The president of Panama has asked the U.S. to end the blockade of Cuba. What does that tell you about the thinking in Panama? What does that tell you about the direction that region is going? They want the U.S. to lift the decades-old, useless, completely failed blockade of Cuba. Has it changed a thing in Cuba? No. Changed anybody's mind? No. In fact, I'd make the argument it's pushed people farther that direction. I've never, ever made the allegation that capitalism is totally evil. It has its place. It absolutely does. And it can be a great engine for progress, but it can't be the driving force of a country. You have to have some goal beyond simply the acquisition of money. Because even the Bible says, for the love of money is the root of all evil. And when you have a political system that says capitalism, what is that? The entire beginning and ending desire of capitalism is simply the acquisition of capital. Nothing else matters. So you have to have a mix. So when you say we're going to blockade this country over here because it's not completely like we think it should be, all you're doing is driving it farther into that camp. And that's what's happened. It's failed. And now countries down there are beginning to see it. Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, now Panama. We know Venezuela. We know Cuba. The Dominican. We know about the new leader of Mexico. He's much closer aligned to Venezuela than he is the United States. Haddad in Brazil is soaring in the polls since he got endorsed by Lula da Silva from the Workers' Party. Everything from our border south within the next 5 to 10 years is going to be about as antithetical to the U.S. as possible. I can't think of one nation. Colombia would be the last chip to fall. They're going to be completely surrounded by people that don't agree with their way of seeing the world, and oh so ever so coincidentally, they are the poster child for all sorts of corruption, violence, trafficking, every measure of criminality you could think of. It's going to be one of those things that's not lost on the world. Now, there's been this statement from the leader, well, not the leader, the foreign minister of Canada, Krista Freeland. And, well, quote unquote, she stated as thus: a group of Latin American countries and Canada said on Wednesday they had asked the International Criminal Court to investigate Venezuela's government over allegations of crimes against humanity in using force to repress political opponents. So that's a bad thing. I see. Using force to repress political opponents is a bad thing. That's weird. Boy, I'm sure glad we don't have any hint of that here in the United States. That'd be terrible. I mean, I'm really, really glad that the U.S. has never allowed U.S. businesses or its government to lower itself to using violence to get its own way, or using power to keep anyone from bringing them to justice. I'm sure glad the U.S. and none of its allies has ever done that. But if this happens, it could be part of a deal. The ending of the blockade on Cuba. Because that would put Cuba in a very interesting position vis-a-vis China. You know, even if we ended the blockade, they could still say, you know what? U.S. visitors are persona non grata. Because the U.S. at this point, sorry about that, the U.S. at this point could have one of those SHTF moments with its currency that we've talked about with the maps. And it might not affect other countries around the world as badly as you might think. And South America gets a great deal of money from tourism. Chinese tourists, Russian tourists, even, almost now, starting to come to the forefront, African tourists. Because there's parts of Africa now that are actually building a middle class because of their newfound wealth from oil. So it might be one of these things where U.S. big oil companies start reading the writing on the wall and say, you know what? For 40 years, we were slave to only providing oil for the American people. I mean, even though we were pumping it out of America, we should have been able to sell it to whoever we want to. So that's what they're going to do. If that were to be the case, and a place like Cuba would start to see massive amounts of investment and people coming there and trying to create a new, somewhat pseudo-capitalist state with a lot of socialism mixed in, the U.S. might be on the outside of that. It's going to be a very odd dynamic, but if Panama wants the U.S. to lift the blockade on Cuba, what do you think is coming in the next 5 to 10 years? We had an opportunity, we really did, to reach out to the neighbors we have historically valued in this hemisphere. It is beyond any reasonable doubt where the root of the drug problem lies. And it's not Mexico. And it ain't going to be fixed by just a wall. Ask China, ask East Germany how walls work. They don't. It doesn't change a thing. Especially when you only build half a wall, which is what would be the case with the United States because of the free flow through the Gulf of Mexico and Florida. And with no plan there to increase any funding to the Fourth Fleet, like we have tried to get people to think about doing here at the channel, I don't see how it fixes anything. Especially given it would be 10 years out, billions of dollars, and the crossings that are there now would still be there. And even the people that work on the border say that's where the vast majority of the drugs are coming through. The open crossings. The crossings that they don't have the financing to check every car. So, I know those of you that have your mind made up that it's a great idea are just going to be stuck on that. But trust me when I tell you, there's going to be a point when Mexico, Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, South America says, you know what? Enough is enough with Canada and the US. We have other options, and they've forced our hand. And we're going to turn to China. We're going to turn to Russia. We're going to turn to India, Turkey, Italy, even the EU to some extent. Because of the attitudes that nobody makes this part of the world a priority. The only priority right now is, can we get enough support from these places to do regime change and humanitarian aid in Venezuela? That is the limit to which the U.S. is interested in the opinions of anyone down here about anything. This is a story here that I know a lot of people aren't real familiar on the details with, but this goes back to the 60s when big business went down there and pretty much set the tone for a war that has cost hundreds of thousands of lives and created a situation that's almost unfixable. So we'll leave it there. Thank you guys so much for your support here at the channel. It's growing like crazy. I'm humbled. I appreciate everything you guys do. Please feel free to join us at Patreon if you want to. We do a lot of psychological operations training there that I think would benefit a lot of people. And it starts as low as $1 a month. It goes up to $20 a month, but that's totally up to you. But once again, the president of Panama has now asked the United States to rethink its attitude towards Latin America. Like, share, subscribe.